no matter if it's a crime of the past or today, when I speak, I'm taking older things, the OJ Simpson stuff,
Mhm.
the, Jussie Smollett stuff. And then I'm taking more current stuff like Kavanaugh that, killed his wife and,
Yeah.
and son over in the Carolinas. So, but it shows up the same way.
Yeah.
This ESL, eye blocking, shoulder shrugging, and lip locking. And it indicates there's more to the story here.
You're listening to Precinct 444, a podcast network from the National Law Enforcement Museum. Today, we're bringing you an episode from Icons, where listeners are introduced to incredible people working within the law enforcement community who have made a profound impact in our world. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Precinct 444. As always, I'm Anna Muckenfoos, the Director of Programs at the National Law Enforcement Museum, and I'm here today with Janine Driver, who works with the Body Language Institute, but has a rich history with the ATF and is doing some very fascinating work in body language analysis. So, Janine, welcome to Precinct 444.
Thanks, Anna. I'm happy to be here. And thanks for the listeners listening in.
Absolutely. To get us started, Janine, you're renowned for your work as a body language expert and the founder of the Body Language Institute. But your career in law enforcement has brought you here. So before we really dive into your area of expertise, tell us a little bit about your time with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
I came on board in 1992 with ATF, and I was there a little shy of 18 years. And no one heard of ATF. I remember when I got the job, I told my parents, I go, I'm working for the FBI. I thought it was like a division of the FBI. I literally had to go in 1992 to my college library and look up on microfiche. If people don't even know what that is, I had to look up who is ATF. And now ATF, for those people who don't know, initiated with Elliot Ness. Originally, it was like the whole taxing of alcohol and the whole illegal alcohol stuff and that whole genre. So I did my microfiche look up and found out a little bit. I was on the regulatory side, so I was an investigator and climbed the ranks pretty quickly because I was open to moving around, and I loved ATF. I still do. They were really good to me. It's a small agency. ATF only has a couple thousand people at the time, and we worked really well together. So I loved ATF. I came on board in Hartford, Connecticut.
And that seems kind of like a scary type of work to be doing, especially so early on in your career. And from your work at the ATF, you went from being an investigator to really being focused on the training aspect
Yeah.
of ATF as well. What did that look like?
Well, I went from Hartford, Connecticut I did a couple details. One of the details I did is I went to headquarters. I did some work up here in DC where I now live in the DC area. And then I went to the World Trade Center. So I worked at the World Trade Center as the Public Information Officer, the PIO. TWA Flight 800 crashed. And many people don't remember this, but it crashed in the Hudson. Everyone died on that flight. And I was one of two PIOs. It was myself and a guy named Joe Green. And Joe was going out to sea. They reassembled that flight, the TWA Flight 800. And what it was a fuselage blew up where the gas was.
Yeah.
But they thought it was a missile that came from the ground up. And they recreated that airplane. It was really surreal over in Long Island in a hangar. And seeing the evidence, like a tiny little teeny piece of metal, like a bit fingernail, would be like evidence piece 1,416. So it's
Yeah.
very surreal. And they reassembled that airplane. I know this isn't what you asked me. I'll get to training.
You're fine.
They reassembled that airplane, and where the fuselage was, they put like slabs of wood, like 2x4s, and reassembled the seats. And all the other seats, Anna, and you at home listening, they were fine. Like all these seats in the back they weren't even ripped. There was no scratches, there was no blood. And that it impacted me. And I remember saying to the person who was giving us this tour that I go, how did people not live? Like it's not all torn to bits, this plane.
Mhm.
And they said because the plane hit the water at such a fast speed
Mhm.
that this is kind of going to be gruesome. So if you're listening and kids are in the room, my recommendation is to just put this on pause for a hot second. But they said the scuba divers went under the water and everyone looked like they were still alive. Like their hair was floating. There was no blood. Everyone's outfits were pretty. And there was not even a scratch on people's faces. But what had happened was from hitting the water so hard, the organs detached on the inside.
Mm.
And so that did something inside of me
Yeah.
hearing that things aren't always what they appear to be. Everything looked fine, but the damage was on the inside that we couldn't see. And that just kind of did something for me. And I knew that I did not want to be the public information officer after this because I was weighing in on this kind of stuff every day as the PIO. Ginseng, this little shots of ginseng you could get.
Mhm.
It used to be a trend in the mid 90s. In upstate New York, a bunch of kindergartners were falling asleep at their desk. And they found out that the parents were stopping at these little 5 and dime stores and buying
Mhm.
little shots of ginseng in a little 1-inch tube
Mhm.
and thinking it was a bunch of vitamins to give to their kids. So they think they're like doping their kids up with all these vitamins,
Yeah.
their little 5 and 6 year old, but it was 80% alcohol. So
Oh,
ATF got involved. So I remember I was 25 years old and I was interviewed on the Today Show. They came in. I had prepared the talking points for my boss, Susan McCarran, the DIO, Director of Industry Operations. The camera crew came, and that day she goes, "Hey, why don't you do this?" And my degree was English communication. So I was
yeah.
like, I called my mom and dad. I'm like, I'm going to be on the Today Show. So ATF had to get involved. It's something you might not think of
Mhm.
with regard to you either have to call it an alcohol product and you have to
Mhm.
be one or older to buy, or change the formatting and those types of things. I was constantly at the World Trade Center watching. I had 3 TVs in my room. I had to read all these newspapers before I started my day, and it was really, poison in, poison out. And I
Yeah.
started to notice I was becoming a negative person, and I was looking for the bad in my relationships with my family, with my sisters, with my mom, with my people I were dating. And when I did the TWA Flight 800 tour, I'm like,
Mhm.
I need to, it's time to pivot. And that's
Mhm.
when I pivoted into training. I went and did a detail. First, I did a detail from the World Trade Center into the FBI for a year in West Virginia. The Brady Bill became a permanent law. So I worked there for a little while, met lovely people, and then went from there to Seattle, Washington, where I became a program manager. And again, firearms trafficking popped up for me there. I was kind of more of a lead, like navigating firearms trafficking that other people were investigating, like kind of like an advisor.
Mhm.
And then from there, I went to training. But I knew I wanted, from the World Trade Center, I knew ultimately I wanted to end up in training, but they
Mhm.
did not have any openings. So I was like, okay, where can I get more experience? So when it comes time for an opening for training, I have all these different titles and I become the best candidate. And I ultimately retired in training with ATF as a grade 14 in headquarters.
Yeah. And what kind of things were you training ATF agents on when you were in that position?
Well, investigators, agents, lawyers, secretaries. Usually program managers have one program, but
Mhm.
I had 5 programs
Oh,
because
wow.
I'm one of these people that likes to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I get bored if I'm not busy working. I say if I hit the lottery for billions of dollars, I'd still be out doing keynote motivational speeches
Mhm.
because I still speak to law enforcement today. I did firearms trafficking, of course, courtroom testimony, I did analytic interviewing, which included body language and detecting deception and how to recall your memory. Cognitive interviewing is remembering things. There was never a secretary training. And I thought that that was such a big disservice for the
Yeah.
agency that I proposed creating one. And I had never been a secretary at ATF, but
Mhm.
I said I'd like to lead it. And so I took some of the top secretaries around ATF around the country, brought them in, did a workshop. I was really good at, what's the purpose, measurable objectives. They sent me
Mhm.
to a special training, how to write courses in a way that it could be accredited.
Mhm.
And so I did courtroom testimony, firearms trafficking, analytic interviewing, which included body language and detecting deception. I did secretary training. And then because the secretary training did so well, my boss said, any interest in creating a supervisor training? So I said, sure. I was an acting supervisor every now and
Mhm.
then, but that's not my cup of tea. I like to say I'm one of the girls in the back of the room or one of the
Yeah.
guys. I like being with the team. I don't like being the
Mhm.
boss.
Absolutely. And you mentioned in that last answer that idea of a tipping point, something that kind of shifted you from one place to another. And somewhere in your ATF career, there was some type of tipping point that got you into the work that you're doing now with your Body Language Institute. So tell us a little bit about that tipping point. What took you from law enforcement to this work that you do now that very, very greatly benefits law enforcement, because I know you do a lot of keynote speaking for law enforcement agencies, but you're training just regular everyday civilians as well. So
Yes.
tell us a little about that tipping point.
Well, I think there was a couple little tipping points on that that pushed me in that direction. The big one I would say is the CIA and the FBI primarily, they train over at Quantico.
Mhm,
The ATF, the DEA, and a bunch of other customs, border patrol, a lot of other some state agencies, local agencies train in Glencoe, Georgia. So Quantico is here in Virginia, where I live. It's
mhm,
right up the street. But over in Glencoe, Georgia, there's something called FLETC, the Federal
mhm,
Law Enforcement Training Center, and um, in FLETC, I loved training. I love learning new things. I still love learning new things. I'm mind mapping today. I'm learning inside about attachment styles today,
mhm.
just for me and in my own personal relationships.
Yeah.
And I love learning. And in our lesson plans at ATF would be these little boxes that would say JJ Newberry moments. And like rapport is people like themselves. Analytic interviewing, an interview is just a conversation with a purpose.
Mhm,
And I remember seeing these JJ Newberry moments on how to be approachable to what I would say nudge human behavior. And I thought that that was so fascinating that I looked him up. And this is before they'd Google, but I somehow searched the internet and found a radio interview with JJ Newberry,
mhm,
tracked him down, called him, and asked him to be my mentor. He didn't call me for, I don't even know, a couple months. And when he called me, I go, hey, I've been expecting, I called him and said, I want to be the next JJ Newberry. I'm wondering if you'll be my mentor. And he called me, I don't know, maybe 4 months later or so. It was a while. And I said, hey, I've been waiting to hear from you. He goes, I wanted to do my due diligence and check you out first. He goes, I called around to find out about your
mhm,
character, your values, who you are as a person before I give you this very specific set of skills. And so he became my mentor, trained me. He has one rule, JJ, which is he'll teach you what he knows on one condition
mhm,
that two conditions, you make it better and
mhm,
then you make it your own and you teach it to others. You
mhm.
have to promise to mentor others. And he's what's called a truth wizard. He can detect deception at more than 85% accuracy. He's the number one truth wizard in the world. It sounds like a weird word, but it's a scientific word that
Mhm,
was done by a very specific set of studies. And then he was my mentor. But if we go really back in time, the first tipping point was, or one of many, is I want you to imagine you're 15 years old. You just turned 16. You have a part time job at a donut shop filling donuts with jelly in the morning at 5 a.m. And your family's going camping. And your mother says you can't go get your check before you go camping because you're going camping for 2 weeks. Why do you need the check?
mhm.
You're just for 15 a week ago. You can't tell your mom and your dad the reason you want to get your check is because the guy who owns the place is a cokehead and he's doing cocaine in the back room where you're there stuffing donuts with jelly
Yeah.
and you're afraid the police are going to come raid the place. So I don't tell my parents that. My mom said we can't go drive, 2.8 miles in the
Mhm,
wrong direction before we go to camp. I hop on my bike, Anna, and you at home. It's pouring rain, thunder and lightning. It's 5 a.m. My parents don't even know I left the house. I ride my bike. I pick up my check. I'm so excited because I have it in my hand. Driving back, a man tries to kidnap me. Now, mind you, this is 1986.
Yeah.
2 years earlier, a little boy named John Walsh was kidnapped in the parking lot of a Sears parking lot, later found beheaded and killed. And um, that his dad, becomes John Walsh, of course, is
Yeah.
America's Most Wanted. It was all over the media. In my little teeny brain, I remember seeing John Walsh and his devastation. I remember the parents' anguish of not knowing what happened to little
Mhm,
Adam Walsh for years, for some time. And I thought when this man tried to kidnap me off my bike, I'm like, he's going to get me. I became like a Liam Neeson movie, before
Yeah.
Taken was created. I'm like, he will take me. He's going to hit
Yeah.
me with his car. He doesn't care if my bones are broken. No one's around. It's pouring rain. It's a Saturday morning at 5:25 a.m.
Hmm.
Ish. And all I could think of is, what am I going to do? And there was a bank. I knew I couldn't go drive back home because I had another couple miles to go. But
Hmm.
there was a bank 2 blocks ahead. I'm like, if I could drive to that bank, maybe if he gets me in front of the bank, there'll be a camera that can get his
Hmm.
his license plate or the make of his car, and my parents will at least have closure. He's
Yeah.
gonna get me, but I'm gonna give my mother and father and the police. I'm gonna give them a hand. And I got away. And the reason I got away that day is because I had had some childhood trauma at 6 that put
Hmm.
me on a path to change the way I look at human behavior. So,
Hmm.
what I say today, and what led me to training, and what led me to become a body language expert and a motivational and keynote speaker and a New York Times bestselling author, all these things goes back to really ultimately at 6, I had childhood trauma that changed my brain, that allows me to have what I call the gift of discernment
Hmm.
about looking at human behavior, that sends me into 10 years later almost getting kidnapped, getting away from a kidnapper despite him having a car, because my
Hmm.
brain became strategic, was able to read differently, think differently. That leads me into law enforcement with ATF for almost 18 years, 2 decades. I trained today, of course, the ICP, WIFL, Women in Federal Law Enforcement. I've had a big contract last year with the state of Massachusetts. I
Hmm.
get grant money on sex trafficking and human trafficking, how to decode human behavior. So I say my job is to help people get 2 steps ahead of human behavior. I now have the words and the vocabulary to train what I learned through trauma. Now I teach it to companies.
Hmm.
So it's kind of those series of tipping points that led me into training and ultimately into writing a book. When I got the book deal when I was with ATF with Random House, that's translated in, I don't even know, 20 languages now.
Hmm.
The only New York Times bestseller on body language. I don't say that in a braggadocious way. I say that in a I had the best editor kind
Yeah.
of way. Heather Jackson, everything she touches turns to gold. She did the 4 Hour Work Week with Tim Ferriss. She did all
Okay.
the Atkins books. So
Hmm.
like when I got her as my editor, I was like like Jesus Christ
Yeah.
came down. It was like
Exactly.
open the heavens. I was like, yes, I'm the best editor. So she really set me up for success. And that's my story. It's these little tipping points. I call them blue streak moments. So
Hmm.
blue streak is like a bolt of lightning. If you're in my pool right now and it starts thunder and lightning, you get the kids out of the pool. If you're playing tennis or golf or basketball, I'm a basketball girl. You're off the court. You're off. You know, a blue streak is something that pushes you in a different direction fast.
And to get into kind of the work that you've done over the last 2 decades in specifically in body language analysis, why is it so important for us to be able to decode other people's body language? Why is this work of body language analysis so important?
Well, first, that's a great question, Anna, and there's a million reasons, and I could do a TED
Mhm.
talk on just that. Is I would say primarily that if you understand that body language happens 5 seconds before thought,
Mhm.
you have a 5 second advantage over other human beings. So if you know what I know, you can have a 5 second advantage to knowing what someone else feels before their brain knows what they feel.
Mhm.
So I can teach you to spot disgust, contempt, duping delight. I can teach you to spot deception, verbally and non-verbally. But body language wise, you have a 5 second advantage. So someone is contemptuous before their own brain realizes they're contemptuous, which is moral superiority, or that
Mhm.
they're disgusted. Disgust is repelling contaminated objects or repelling contaminated situations. They don't like you, your ideas, but you can spot it. And if you can spot it, you have a 5 second chance to get ahead of it. This is why I say you can get 2 steps ahead of human behavior when you understand how to decode it. And words. I'm writing a book right now, potentially for HarperCollins. They're looking at it. I'm writing a book
Mhm.
proposal for them. And the book potentially is going to be called 38 Words with Hidden Meaning That'll Change Your Life. And anyone who's been trained in statement analysis or scan training, you may know some of those words. There's others you don't know, but there's words that have secret meaning. And so the reason body language matters, or just understanding both verbal and nonverbal,
Mhm.
these hidden meanings, is it gives you an advantage. I mean, think of athletes, think of military people. 5 seconds is a lot of time. In law
Yeah.
enforcement, 5 seconds makes the difference between you dodging a bullet or you being killed in the line of duty. A 5 second advantage helps you make smarter choices, smarter decisions. It helps you decide what to do next. If you have that 5-second advantage, you can disarm a very difficult situation and you can literally save lives, including your own.
Mhm. And where does someone really start when we're talking to people in our regular everyday conversations and we sense that something's off, we want to decode someone's body language. What are the things we should start to look for in those conversations?
Well, there's a bunch. I have like my favorites, kind of my
Yeah.
go-to. So I did a TED Talk. I've done a couple TED Talks. I did a TED Talk called Decoding the Body Language of Murderers. So I'm the body language expert for Court TV, and I weigh in on different murder cases. We could chat about those if you want. But decoding the body language of murderers to have a better life or get what you want, something like that. And in that TED Talk, I came up with the acronym ESL. These are my favorites because there's a bunch. There's over 5,000 body language moves and over 5,000 words with hidden meaning. So my favorites are ESL. So I say ESL is everyone's second language. ESL, eye blocking, shoulder shrug, and lip locking. So eye blocking is like the screensaver on your cell phone. The screensaver on your cell phone comes on so people can't see your private information on your cell phone. That's what eye blocking is. Eye blocking is someone has just put their mental screensaver on so you can't know what's going on inside their head. So they're giving you the average in the United States is about 65% eye contact, but you can baseline them. You always want to baseline someone's normal behavior. And how do they respond when they're just answering questions you already know the truth to? They have no reason to lie. Then you look for the change in that behavior. So eye blocking, all of a sudden, they're looking down, they're scratching their forehead, they're adjusting their baseball hat, they're looking away. Some people look away as part of their baseline because they're very auditory and they process through sound and they lend you an ear. I'm very auditory. So if you're telling me something and I'm trying to memorize what you're saying, I literally will turn my head and I lend you my right ear to try to process. I'm listening with precision when I do that. I think that understanding ESL eye blocking is indicating they don't want you to see something that's happening inside their head. A shoulder shrug is uncertainty. So when I say, hey, this is really fun to be here, Anna, and I shoulder shrug, I'm telling you I'm uncertain about something. It doesn't mean, and this is in law enforcement where people read it wrong. So if I say, hey, Anna, I'm happy you're here, and listener, I'm glad you're here, listener, and I shrug, many people will think, no, she's not. She's not happy. She shrugged. That's uncertainty. You get a feeling. But maybe the reason I'm uncertain is we talked about the interview would be 30 minutes to an hour, and I'm not sure if we're at the hour mark yet. Maybe I'm shrugging because I'm like, how much, I know I talk way too much. So I'm shrugging because I'm like, you asked me one question and I talked for 45 minutes. That's my ADD. Maybe I shrug because my son just walked out on the front porch and showing me the time, and I promised them to take them to a trampoline park. Like, we don't know what the catalyst is on body language. I can teach you how to spot it, and you can spot it on your own, or you can teach yourself. But here's the deal. You don't know what the catalyst is. Body language does not tell you why it's happening. It tells you what it is, uncertainty, but what is the catalyst? What made that uncertainty come up? You have to ask the question. I call that MIW formula. Maybe I'm wrong here. So, Anna, maybe I'm wrong here. It seems to me that when you said that you enjoyed this interview, it seemed you were uncertain about something. And then I stop. Wait, WAIT. It stands for why am I talking? And I just wait. And you're like, oh, no, sorry, Janine. I was distracted because my son came out. I'm supposed to take him to the trampoline park. He was trying to get me to wrap it up.
Yeah.
So back to ESL is everyone's second language. Shoulder shrug is uncertainty. And then the last one is L is a lip lock. When we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. And you pull your lips in really tight right here. Dr. David Matsumoto, who is a friend and I've also trained with Dr. Paul Ekman, but Matsumoto is my guy. I love Dr. David Matsumoto. I love him. And he went out and did a really interesting study with blind and sighted athletes with the Olympics. And they show the same emotions when they win and when they lose. Born blind. They show defeat the same way and success the same way, which is such a fascinating, crazy, amazing study, I think. So Dr. David Matsumoto says when the lips disappear, he calls it, he says a lip lock. He calls them a lip lock. And he said, lip roll equals emotional control. So that's his cheeky expression. A lip roll equals emotional control. My cheeky expression is when we don't like what we see or hear, our lips disappear. And either one, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And whether you were the Queen of England, because I show a picture of her in my keynotes, or you were A-Rod lying back in the day about taking steroids to Katie Couric, or you're one of the more current criminal cases that's going on. There was a Karen Reed murder trial that just took place in Massachusetts, got a lot of hype. I think that she was framed by law enforcement, and Massachusetts law enforcement's being investigated by the FBI because of this. And one of the lead witnesses is Karen Reed herself. That whole thing over there in Canton, Massachusetts is a big mess. So no matter if it's a crime of the past or today, when I speak, I'm taking older things, the O.J. Simpson stuff, the Jussie Smollett stuff, and then I'm taking more current stuff like Kavanaugh that killed his wife and son over in the Carolinas. So, but it shows up the same way.
Yeah.
This ESL, eye blocking, shoulder shrugging, and lip locking. And it indicates there's more to the story here. So where I would start, if I were you, is looking at those three things. You can look at any of my stuff for free online, get my books out if you want from the library, but I'm not the only one. There's a great book out there I love by a woman named Lena Cisco, and that's called Honest Answers. Really, Flexi should be using this as their manual for this class, so should ATF. Honest Answers by Lena Cisco. She's retired from the NCIS, from the Navy, and she interviewed the Taliban in Guantanamo Bay. She calls it Gitmo. And she wrote a book that is, literally, it'll take you a couple months to learn it if you really want to learn it. But she had me write the foreword, and I was delighted to write I learned so much from this book. There's a great book also out there called Spy the Lies. And I don't know those guys, but those were people that worked for the CIA. There's a couple authors on that, Spy the Lie. And then any Joe Navarro books. Joe Navarro's a friend. I love all the Joe Navarro books, including a body language dictionary. So if I were to start learning body language, I would start first with Joe Navarro's book, The Body Language Dictionary, 100%. And you look it up. And so like there's a lip section, there's a mouth section. So all of a sudden you're looking at your tapes. If you're watching your footage or your interviews of a suspect or of a witness, you go, oh, the lips just disappeared. That nose just wrinkled. Joe puts it in categories by the body. And so you can go to the lip section and look really quick. Holy shit, this is it. And this is what it indicates.
Yeah.
I would start there. It's so good. It's so good.
Yeah. That's great. And you mentioned that I watched that Decoding Body Language of Murderers TED Talk in preparation for our interview today. I watched all the TED Talks and tried to read everything I could.
You did? Did you have a favorite? I did 4. Was there
I
one
really,
you really
liked I'm a big true crime person. I'm watching I like to think that it's because when my mom was pregnant with me, she was obsessed with the O.J. Simpson trial. So and watched that her entire summer vacation that year. So I'm going to think those two things are correlated. But the Decoding Body Language of Murderers one was really interesting to me because and I am just similar to how you mentioned, in childhood, finding this kind of this need to be able to observe how other people are. And when I was a kid, it was observing how other people were and trying to kind of shift my behavior or shift what I was doing to make them happy. So in a very people-pleasing type of way.
Yes.
Being very observant of how people were reacting to me and how people were acting when they were around. So body language is something that's always been really interesting to me. And then as I got older and became interested in true crime, you see they usually bring it up on 48 hours, how somebody wasn't looking at the officer when they're asking questions or
became overly polite. Yeah.
Overly polite, overly helpful, all those kinds of things.
Yes, ma'am.
And
yes, sir.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to give you my cell phone. I'd love to give you everything you possibly could want, So the kind of looking at that body language of murderers is really interesting. And you mentioned working with Court TV on some of these cases. So tell us a little bit about that.
They can measure energy, and they've measured the energy of love versus authenticity. And authenticity is something like 40 times stronger than love. And I'd like to think that I'm an authentic person. If you were here at my house, I'm the same version as I am in this podcast and or on a stage or on TV and with my kids. I'm a very positive, uplifting person, unapologetically a swearing Christian. Although I work on the swearing part. I work on the swearing part. I do, because that's not really great. But I'm the same me. I don't
Mhm.
have like six versions of me. I think maybe I used to back in the day, and I was like,
Yeah.
I'm sick of this. I'm just one me now. And I love Vinnie Politan. He's very, very authentic, very real, funny. He's funny.
Mhm.
He's so funny. He's like Janine Driver, the author of "You Can't Lie to Me." Like, he's just so funny. I enjoy.
Yeah.
In those cases, what I think I'm really different from the other body language experts they have on there, Vinny, but I've been told I'm his favorite person to have on, as a body language expert, is I will, because I've been weighing in on this for so many
Mhm.
years with my background in ATF and law enforcement and working with law enforcement. I've trained the CIA, the FBI, Scotland Yard Police, tons of state police and local police, sheriff's offices. I've spoken to sheriff's associations. I mean, I love law enforcement. If you're listening in law enforcement and you have training coming out, I work with your budget, because I'm the best version of me when I'm serving, especially
Mhm.
serving law enforcement. I think today, being into law enforcement, you're a hero to even step in the ring. So thank you for your service. And so I'm always willing to help law enforcement anyway, including online. I do some online trainings to
Mhm.
keep them safe, and I do schools too. I do
Mhm.
schools for free, because I want schools to make smart decisions and keep
Yeah.
kids safe. On court TV, what I'm good at is connecting this case, whatever case we're talking about, with previous cases. So I'll be like, oh, we saw this facial expression on Casey Anthony. We saw this on Jussie Smollett. We saw this on Dahlia DiPolito, that hired an undercover cop, didn't know he's an undercover cop, to
Mhm.
kill her husband. We saw this case with, and then the Menendez brothers, or we saw
Yeah.
this case with, Kavanaugh, who shot and killed, brutally slaughtered his young adult son and wife. And so I'm good at bringing them into the different cases, because I have a good memory on that. And I like cheeky expressions.
Mhm.
And I can sometimes see and hear things other people, the everyday person, isn't seeing and hearing. So it might look like there's nothing happening here. I remember there was a guy, I don't know if he was like a shooter that was in a mall shooting or something, but he was very stoic and it looked like he didn't move at all. But he did move. He moved his right ear slightly. So his head slightly moved, and his right ear moved towards his attorney and not towards the judge. And so I'm like, okay, what, I need to say something, because Court TV is going to send me this clip.
Mhm.
And I'm looking at it, and there's like nothing. And I'm like, wait a minute, his ear slightly moved to the right. That's interesting. So I do research, a ton of research on the right ear versus the left ear. And lo and behold, I find out that there's something called an REA. REA is right ear activation.
Hmm.
When we are having ambient noises and there's other noise around, we know that children in schools will lean their right ear to listen to the teacher more clearly. Well, now they have done studies, Anna, and you at home, that adults do the same thing. So when adults are trying to hyper focus on one thing, we will slightly move our right ear towards the person we want to eavesdrop on or listen to. So here it looks like there's nothing happening with this guy
Mhm.
in court TV, this defendant. And I do all this research and I come on, and the other body language experts are like, well, there's nothing here, there's
Yeah.
nothing here to see. And I come on and I go, I disagree. Look at this. Look at this. He moves at least 4 inches, that right ear, towards who? Towards the judge who's talking to him, or towards his attorney? No,
Mhm.
he slightly moved his head towards the attorney. And this is activating his right ear activation. This is the study that was done here, here, here. And I do mind math. So I brought in
Mhm.
all this data. And then the producer's always like, damn, just when we think there's nothing, Janine Driver comes and like blows our mind
Find
with some cool
something.
stuff. I find something. So I'm always learning, constantly learning about human behavior. I'm fascinated by it.
How can understanding body language both serve law enforcement and civilians in our careers and our everyday lives? I know your books have covered on a lot of this, but just to kind of summarize it for everybody, what makes body language so important for all aspects of our life?
Other than getting two steps ahead of human behavior, that you can make smarter decisions, you can stop drama in its tracks, you can protect yourself, your friends, your family, your finances, you can eliminate reading people incorrectly and stop making bad decisions. And you can grow your emotional intelligence. Your self-awareness is, if a mirror dropped down in front of you, are you showing the version of you who you think you are in the inside, or are you throwing a party of something else
Yeah.
that you're being read wrong and people think you don't have executive presence, but inside you do? Other than those numerous takeaways, if I were to chunk way up and I say, what is the value of body language in reading people personally and professionally? I would say it will inspire you to look at your world differently. You will look at your world in a different way. And that's my why. I had childhood trauma and I very easily could have became a criminal. I could have became an addict. I think I was probably well on my way with my drinking back in the day. And instead, I turned it into a blue streak. A blue streak is something good or bad that happens in our life that changes the direction of your life by decoding body language accurately, reading micro expressions, growing your emotional intelligence, decoding these 38 words with hidden meaning that will change your life. You will ultimately look at your world in a different way. You will change your perspective. I think of Robin Williams from Dead Poets Society when he stood on that desk and he had them look at the world from a different perspective. It's all the same stuff happening in front of you, but all of a sudden you're going to find those Where Waldo moments. You're going to see things that you didn't see before. When you start to decode body language and know these 38 words with hidden meaning, you'll start to hear the words, see the words, see them in text messages. You'll hear them on phone calls. You'll see them in emails. You'll see them with celebrities, politicians, athletes. Your kids will say it. I'll tell you one quick word on our way out here with the hidden meaning, which is if your kids say the word bored. As adults, when we say we're bored, it connects back to the beginning of our conversation with decision loading. Mm-hmm. If you have employees that are bored, then they probably are high decision loaders. Your job is to treat them fairly, not equally. Give them more work to do. I got paid the same amount of money as everyone else that had one program, but I had those 5 programs, right? And I loved it. Yeah. When kids are saying they're bored, the hidden meaning behind bored is I don't feel like I matter and belong. Mm-hmm. I don't feel seen by you. I will stop if I hear my kids say bored, and I immediately go let them know they matter and belong. And I say when they matter and belong, cooperation is strong. So there are words with hidden meaning. There's body language with hidden meaning. When you understand it, you will be inspired to look at your world in a different way.
Absolutely. And if anybody wanted to get in contact with you about the work that you do, about speaking, about your work in a keynote kind of address, how would they get in contact with you?
It's thank you. That's so nice to let me shout that out. JanineDriver.com is my website. It's just my name, Janine. That's the French way. Je m'appelle Janine. Comment ça va? So Janine, driver, like a taxi driver. Beep, beep. JanineDriver.com. I will work with your budget if you're in law enforcement. If you are a school or know someone that's in a school, I speak for free 100% online for schools, elementary, middle school, high school. Whether you are a group of teachers, advisors, you are deans, or you want me to do a special program for the students. This one school in New Jersey has me back every year for the last 8 years. And I speak to a group of seniors in a communication course for free. I do things based on the age group. I'll pull video clips and talk about stories that are age appropriate. I have 15 different programs. So emotional intelligence, decision-making, body language, detecting deception, and a bunch of things in the middle. And if I can help in any way, I'm the best version of me when I'm serving others. So JanineDriver.com. Let me know how I can serve, how I can help, and be safe. And God bless you. Thanks for being in law enforcement.
Thank you so much, Janine, for talking with us today and being on the podcast. We really appreciate hearing your stories and expertise. And this was a very fun interview. So really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
We hope you found this conversation enlightening and will join us again for another edition of Icons, where we introduce listeners to incredible people working within law enforcement who have had a profound impact on the community. These one-on-one interviews provide insight into their lives and careers so we can better understand their challenges and recognize their bravery, commitment, and sacrifice. The Icon series is not just about contemporary figures in the law enforcement community, but about all of those who have served their communities and the world, from now and in the past. Please subscribe to Precinct 444 on your favorite podcasting platform to stay connected and to receive our latest content as soon as it drops. We would love to hear from you. Send in your questions, comments, and feedback to precinct444@nleomf.org. You can help us make our content even better. The National Law Enforcement Museum is located at 444 East Street Northwest in Washington, D.C., and is dedicated to telling the story of American law enforcement. We expand and enrich the relationship between law enforcement and the community through educational journeys, immersive exhibitions, and insightful programs. Find us online at lawenforcementmuseum.org and stay tuned for more podcast content from Precinct 444. Until next time, stay safe. We'll see you at the precinct.